Hi guys, and welcome back to SwitchUp. My name's Mark Walker, and a thanks to Azdin, big friend of the channel and owner of Grinning Wolf Games. Check out a link to that in the top pinned comment. He's taken on this Mary Skelter review for us. The Mary Skelter franchise saw its debut on the PS Vita towards the end of 2016 and has seen 2 sequels of the dungeon crawling RPG. Mary Skelter Finale, or Final, brings the Blood Maiden's tale to an end, full of content that recaps the story events from the previous games, which helps newcomers understand the narrative. Longtime fans will have access to the collections of music and picture galleries of the series, and it makes the most of some interesting mechanics. But is it waifu for lifu, or have we got to say sayonara baby? Well, let's find out. The game takes place after the true ending of the previous installment, and the protagonist manages to escape the subterranean live-in prison known as jail. Very original. Hoping this would be a happy ending, instead they're welcomed by a devastated world full of death and blood-soaked streets. Without warning, a group known as the Executioner Girls attack them, forcing them to split up into 3 groups. The game has a lot of story cutscenes with tons of text. If you're invested in the narrative presented to you, then it's a chance to immerse yourself into this bleak world. However, a lot of the narration took over 10 minutes, and some may find it a bit exhaustive to stare at so much text and would have instead preferred a little more of the actual gameplay, the dungeon crawling aspect. I personally didn't feel that attached to the plot, so I was happy to skip it and crack on with some of the actual gameplay. I found the pacing really stretched, as you either spent ages in a dungeon with no cutscene events, or when they arrived they outstayed their welcome. The developers have also included a separate game mode that was originally pre-order exclusive, known as Locked Up in Love. I only briefly got to try this out, but it is good to see that it's in there for fans of the series. After a long introduction, you'll have a group to select by choosing their leader. This group will need to navigate through the labyrinthian dungeons, collecting loot, fighting monsters, and avoiding the Nightmare, which is essentially the dungeon's wandering boss. The mobs in each of these dungeons are these hellish creatures, which will chase after you, and a battle will commence when they catch up. And you'll be looking to destroy the jail core. Once knocked out, the creatures, which were initially immortal until you've reached and destroyed it, can then be taken out. Doing so will allow the player to stand up to this creature known as the Nightmare and truly defeat it. This is one facet of the dungeon crawling I found most enjoyable, as it created a sense of urgency to avoid the Nightmare at all times, while simultaneously there was a race going on to find the jail core and take it out. If, like me, you've never played a Mary Skelter game, you may find yourself a bit perplexed by the game's mechanics and general flow. Luckily, there are cleverly placed tutorials throughout the playthrough, which can be accessed later via the library in the pause menu. The dungeons are vast in size, and a new feature to the series is the zapping screen. There will usually be 2 groups within different parts of the dungeon, and they have to work together in order to complete certain puzzles. You'll also find locked doors that require a lever to pull, which may be on the complete opposite side, and this means that although both teams are carrying their own exploration, they're still supporting each other by pulling and flicking levers on opposite ends of the map. Now, it wouldn't be much of a dungeon crawler if we didn't mention loot. This can be found within the dungeon or as battle rewards. Some rewards take the form of different crystals. These can then be planted within special terrain and hosed down with blood packs in order to increase the chances of obtaining better loot. Although slightly macabre, I found this a clever way to use your time in the dungeon, as at times you'll be exploring and going around in circles, finding the right lever to pull or activity to carry out. Planting and harvesting gave a real sense of reward for both defeating enemies as well as spending more time within that dungeon. The living dungeons also have a few desires that, when fulfilled, will reward the party with benefits. These may require killing a number of enemies and collecting the heart tokens you come across, or other small activities. Each character will have a blood ability. These are skills that help the group navigate through the dungeon, as well as solve puzzles, protect against traps, and so on. Rather than waiting to unlock certain combat skills through leveling up, the Blood Maidens can allocate points to certain skills, allowing them to customize them further in battle. I found this to be a welcome feature, and this can make it feel a little more accessible, albeit choosing the right skill can be tricky, so you have to do it wisely. As far as battle mechanics go, these are reasonably well fleshed out. Your group will usually be composed of a party leader that acts more as a support character by healing with items and buffing with the Mary gun. This gun's used to buff and manage the many status effects that the team members go through through in battle, and it's attached to your character and uses up blood as ammunition. There are a limited amount of uses before either you have to reload or you pass out, so strategy is key. The blood maidens get splattered with the enemy's blood, and this then fills a gauge found by the face icon. Once filled, it can cause them to enter massacre mode, increasing attacks and stats. However, if it's filled with corrupted blood, they go into Blood Skelter mode. This is a berserk mode of sorts, injuring friend and foes alike, and sees the character changing their abilities as well as their physical form. Thankfully, both of these modes end after the battle. If you thought things couldn't get any stranger, then you'll be pleased to hear that splattered blood can also be licked off during battle, consuming the built-up gauge and offering a few buffs of its own. For those willing to push through, the game really opens up after Chapter 2, including the base building system with different shops and factories and other jobs, and the battle mechanics along with the planting of crystals in exchange for harvesting items adds to the overall value of it. As far as gameplay goes though, I found it to be a little bit unevenly paced. The narration and dungeon crawling sections can become exhaustive at times, and I really struggle to push through. Now, fans of the genre might be listening to this going, yep, that sounds like Mary Skelter, and they'll be right at home with it, but I would say it's quite niche and won't suit everyone. For me, I give gameplay 14 out of 20. Controls generally work as intended. You can strafe your character left and right, which is a nice addition, with quad directional movement. One nice feature is the autopilot map. You can pinpoint your destination and your whole group will swiftly move to those coordinates. Just bear in mind that this can be interrupted by random groups of enemies. I didn't experience any input latency, which was good, and the battles can be set to automatic if the grind becomes a bit too real. Overall control score 17 out of 20. Mary Skelter is presented with an anime-style character design and landscapes, which in turn capture the macabre tones of the world. Voiceovers can be set to Japanese for those who prefer it, although the English voice acting didn't bother me personally and it was plentiful. The text size cannot be changed but it is legible, and I had no real issues in that regard in handheld. The developers included extra content such as the story recap of the previous games presented as a graphic novel. This is a great addition that allows newcomers to familiarise themselves with the world and the characters in it. Surprisingly, one of my favourite visual aspects was the actual map screen, possibly the highlight of this area, where the audio and visual just ties together to bring the world to life. Now, having said all of this, some may find it a bit too spicy and feel repelled by some of the visuals that leave nothing to the imagination. I do enjoy anime massively, but I personally dislike this style of animation. It's also definitely not one for the kids, as you've probably already gathered when it goes to the language used. The soundtrack's it's what you'd expect, but it does lend itself to this style, particularly in those battles. Overall, I give visuals 14 out of 20, and the audio scores 16 out of 20. This one retails at £44.99, €49.99, or $49.99, and it has a download of 7.2 gigs. There are some free cosmetics, and there is a lot of content crammed into it. It feels like they really wanted to end the saga with a bang and added in tons of content for fans and newcomers alike, as well as that pre-order exclusive I mentioned, Locked Up in Love. Slightly higher price tag, mainly due to the licensing of music and other elements, but it feels mostly justified here. Thankfully, there are 2 physical versions available as well. It's not without its flaws though, and it can become a bit of an uphill struggle during those first hours. It scores 14 out of 20. Mary Skelter Finale feels like the right send-off for the series. There's enough content to keep you busy for quite some time, if you're patient enough, due to the overly heavy dialogue and somewhat slower paced dungeon traversal. Underneath the clutter though lies a decent dungeon crawling RPG that has enough unique mechanics to keep you engaged. I wouldn't start here, I'd go back to the beginning and try and grab one of those earlier titles to see if it's for you. It gets a SwitchUp score of 75%. Thanks as always to Azdin for writing this one. Let us know in the comments if it's a series you enjoy and if it's a game you'll be checking out. And hopefully I will see some of you guys at EGX in London on Saturday. If you enjoy the channel, consider sticking around. And as always, a big thanks to our patrons. You guys are awesome. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys. See ya!